Alright, next video is Forrest Valkai. I saw this video recently. According to the thumbnail, it's a questions video. Title is A Flood of Nonsense, Global Flood or Mass Extinction, ? It sounds like he's making a false dichotomy, where it's either a global flood or a mass extinction, but it could easily be both. Even with the animals that were saved on the ark, you could still have mass extinctions. There were plenty of fish that could have gone extinct. And then it depends on how much time are you willing to give it to call it a mass extinction, because animals could easily go extinct after getting off the ark, like within the same year. And you couldn't even prove mass extinction anyway, one way or the other, no matter what you believe. Whether you believe in the flood or you believe in evolution, you're not going to be able to prove when a species went extinct, unless they went extinct in modern times, and like if the last panda in captivity dies, well, then we know when it went extinct. But for the dinosaurs, the dodos, most species, you're not going to know when they went extinct. Was it all at the same time, or did they slowly wither over time? Some species we thought were extinct turned out not to be extinct. So again, you couldn't know. Forrest in this video it sounds like he's going to have to recognize that fossils had to be laid down immediately. Like, you have to recognize that fossils cannot be laid down slowly over time. They have to be laid down quick burial. If he doesn't even recognize that, he's probably not going to have much of anything relevant to say. Alright, let's see what he actually says. Oh, just God.
Today, after many requests from you guys in the comments, we're back with our old friends John and Jane as they tell us their opinion on the concept of extinction. As I talked...
Dang it! I didn't know he was going back to Genesis apologetics. I was not ready for this. I was expecting this to be a question video. Let's go.
But before we get into that, I have to thank my patrons on Patreon.
Nope. Skip.
Thanks so much to Battle for sponsoring this video. And now, let's see what John and Jane have to say about mass extinctions.
Is it just me, or is the explanation for mass extinctions kind of missing the explanation part?
No, it's just you. It is always just you, Jane.
I believe there are probably 5 different massive extinctions in Earth's history. You can see them right here. They date these extinctions by where they believe they see them in the geologic column.
So the most famous one is the huge asteroid, right?
Yeah, right here it says, evidence shows that at the end of the Cretaceous period, a huge asteroid crashed into Earth. About that same time, dinosaurs and many other species went extinct.
What's the weirdest thing that could be a problem with that statement? Let's see.
About that time?
Well, this theory's had some problems. First, some scientists dated the dinosaur extinction 300,000 years after they say the asteroid hit.
A little delayed action there.
It does kind of sound like a delayed reaction. Until you go back and read the textbook that you were just reading out of. The asteroid caused global climate change. If that asteroid had been big enough to kill every single dinosaur on the whole planet all at once, there wouldn't be any more life left on this planet after that event.
It would have evaporated thousands of millions of tons of water, which would condense and come down as rain. It would have caused an earthquake 1,000,000 times stronger than any earthquake in recorded history. They also noted that from the transient cavity, a tidal wave 3 miles high would envelop the entire Earth in 27 hours. To do that, it had to be moving at about 750 kilometers an hour. NASA published an artist's impression of that wave. It gives some idea of the height of the wave, but absolutely no idea of the enormous power of so many billions of tons of water moving at the speed of a jet aircraft.
Let's keep going.
That the asteroid was too wimpy to cause the mass extinction.
I don't know exactly what study they're talking about here or if such a study even exists, but again, nobody is saying that that asteroid was the sole cause of this mass extinction. It's just a triggering event that set off a cascade of other things that took out the dinosaurs and lots of other species over the course of tens of
triggering event that caused the cascade. That's what a cause is. That's literally what a cause is.
thousands of years. There would have been several other factors such as increased volcanism, increased cloud cover, rapid changes of climate and sea levels, and even fungal infections, which reptiles normally have to bask in the sun in order to fight off, but they wouldn't have been able to do that for a long time due to the increased cloud cover after the asteroid impact.
Oh, yeah, after what now? After the asteroid impact.
Giving mammals, endotherms, a huge adaptive advantage. That's called the fungal infection mammalian selection hypothesis, and it's one of my favorite things to think about regarding the KT extinction. But again, John and Jane don't have to take this from me. It's right there in the textbook that they're reading from.
Actually, the part you have highlighted is talking about many mass extinctions were caused by these other factors, not necessarily the one concerned with the asteroid. There is a period here, and John and Jane were obviously only talking about the asteroid one at this current moment.
Guys, you have to read the material if you want to learn this stuff.
Another team claims that they found dinosaur fossils that lived past the impact.
Yes, we have found lots of dinosaur fossils from after the asteroid impact, for all the reasons that I just talked about. Also, it wasn't all of the dinosaurs that went extinct in this mass extinction. It was just the non-avian ones. The avian dinosaurs, the ones that had already evolved warm blood and feathers, those guys evolved in...
I know I've seen a video from Standing for Truth that better debunks this whole avian evolving from dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are not avian. Just stop that. And go to Standing for Truth. They've got a video somewhere on this, but unfortunately their channel is so full of debates and just a whole bunch of videos that I do not have time to even think about looking for. But no, birds did not evolve from dinosaurs. Just doesn't work.
Into birds. Literally all the birds on Earth today are the descendants of the dinosaurs.
Literally none of them.
That survived the KT extinction event, which makes dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets like a really weird thing to think about.
So,
No, it doesn't.
it's far from settled.
No, it's pretty settled. We have mountains of evidence for literally all of this.
Is the same thing true for other mass extinctions?
Right here it says, until recently, researchers looked for a single cause for each mass extinction. Then it continues. Many mass extinctions, however, were probably caused by several factors, working in combination. Volcanic eruptions, moving continents, and changing sea levels.
You mean they only have several different ideas about what caused mass extinctions?
John, that's not at all what she just said.
Right. But they just listed everything that would be taking place during the worldwide flood.
What?
Wow, you're right. You know, Genesis 7:23 says, "So he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping thing and bird of the air. They were destroyed from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive."
Wow, what an evil thing to do. I wonder how many...
No, it doesn't. Your concept of good comes from God, so it is actually logically impossible for him to do evil. It would be evil for you to do that, because you would be playing God.
Many pregnant mothers and newborn babies died in this horrible event. Also, even if it was somehow justifiable to murder every single human on the planet all at once, what did the cattle and all the other animals do to deserve to be drowned in this way? Of what sins were the gophers guilty? More importantly,
It's called collateral damage. Man was in charge of the earth. The animals were part of the earth. It's as simple as that. They died because of who had dominion over them.
what kind of absolute monster would do something like that in order to get their point across, especially when they have infinite power to do literally anything else, but ignoring the monumental...
Now we're getting into some deep hypothetical here. The problem isn't that God did this when there are other possibilities. The problem you have is why God did this specifically instead of other options. And that's something you need to ask God. But here's one possibility that seems reasonable, or at least partially reasonable. It does not have to be the whole answer, so don't talk to me like you're Prophet of Zod. But hang on. Well, there's another YouTube channel. I believe it's called Creation Science with Philip Stott. You can actually find him in my playlist section. Just look for Philip Stott. He has great videos on this. I'm not finished going through them all, but in one or a couple of the videos, he explains how the meteor, the asteroid, would have broken open the crust. I think he explained. I only remember him talking more about how it would have created huge tidal waves 300 meters high, but I'm sure he probably said something in there about breaking open the crust, and that's when the plates started moving and Pangea broke apart into the separate continents. And we know that God wanted people to be separate. So by separating the land, first, he gives them places where they can be stuck and be forced to be separate from everyone else. But of course, doing that breakup causes a global flood, which will kill everybody, so he saves them on the ark. Now, I'm sure the argument against this would be the Tower of Babel, because that came after the flood. But like I said, it's just a small piece of the puzzle. God can have many separate reasons for judging the world in the specific way he did.
The moral problems with this story, Jane said that what we were describing is everything that would happen during a worldwide flood, which raises a lot more questions. Like, for example, why would a flood set off volcanoes? And how could volcanic activity contribute?
I actually just told you how. The tectonic plates were broken up by the asteroid.
To mass extinctions if the entire Earth was already underwater. Also, how did a flood cause...
Wait, what?
Why would a flood set off volcanoes? And how could volcanic activity contribute to mass extinctions if the entire Earth was already underwater? Also, how did a flood cause...
That's your problem. They did not say the volcanoes contributed to the extinctions. They just said that volcanic eruptions were a part of the flood. Also, you got animals running from the flood, so they could accidentally run into a lava flow or an eruption. So, yeah, they could contribute.
Cause continental drift? And what about the asteroid, which is how we started all this? Wouldn't that thick layer of water have lessened the impact? Why?
No, because it's the asteroid that released the water. Pay attention.
This fits perfectly with all the massive fossil graveyards we find all around the world. For example, at the Lance Creek Formation in Wyoming, we found lots of species of dinosaurs mixed with birds, fish, crocodiles, lizards, snakes, turtles, frogs, salamanders, and small mammals.
So I just looked it up, and the Lance Creek Formation dates back between 65 and 69 million years ago. All of the animals that you just described were around between 65 and 69 million years ago. Literally all the birds on Earth today are the descendants of the dinosaurs. It's not like the dinosaurs went extinct and then all the turtles and salamanders and mammals all just quickly evolved within the last 65 million years. They've all been around for hundreds of millions of years. Do you think that we think that the dinosaurs were the only things alive in the Mesozoic era?
You know, I've heard that almost every dinosaur graveyard in the world shows fossils deposited by or in watery mud or sand.
That's because fossils form in watery mud and sand, John. That's where permineralization takes place. It's like you just said, I hear that we only find ice cubes in little trays inside freezers. Yeah, that's where those are made, dude.
And even more incredible, many dinosaur fossils are found in a classic death pose with their necks arched back. Possibly from choking.
Lots of dinosaur fossils are found in what's known as...
Okay, took me a second to figure out what he was doing so wrong there. The point John and Jane were making is that they were fossilized by water. They were found in mud. Mud is wet. What are we just going to say about the archbacks?
known as an epistotonic position or a death pose, with the head arched back over the body. And this can happen for a variety of reasons, from poisoning to infection to lack of oxygen to the brain, which can happen for a
Hang on. How many animals have you seen arch back in death? Specifically dinosaurs. I'm trying to think of a live animal that would die like that from poison. Our backs naturally want to bend inward, not arch outward. You better have prepared a video clip of an animal dying like this. Otherwise, I am calling shenanigans. Animals do not naturally die with their back arched from poison. Their back has to be forcibly arched.
Variety of reasons, not just drowning. And experiments on modern chickens have shown that it's really easy to knock dead birds into these positions, meaning that a lot of these dinosaurs may have been placed into these poses after death but before fossilization due to totally...
That is a much better argument than trying to say they arched their back while dying of poison.
normal taphonomic processes like being eaten by scavengers. But the most important thing to remember here is that lots of different kinds of animals assume this same pose for lots of different reasons, not just asphyxiation. So here's the million-dollar question for you, John. Why do you think so many dead dinosaurs are found in a death pose?
Why do you think it's a death pose as opposed to a specific way of dying? You've given one possible answer, which could apply to some of the fossils, that the necks got arched post-mortem. Post-rigor mortis, even. He says, unless rigor mortis is permanent. I'm not a doctor, I don't know that. Regardless. And I lost my place again. Let's keep going.
Take all the time you need.
Exactly. So, if you take their geologic column and squeeze it down into one event, the worldwide flood.
That does better explain what we see.
No, it absolutely doesn't, and I
Yes, it absolutely does.
will prove it to you. If all of these animals died
Dang it. Important questions that flood believers never ask with Forrest Valkai.
at once, why do we find them in layers with every ecological niche represented in each layer? Why do the animals tend to get more complex?
I wish he'd label the questions so I can stop the video properly. What's the word? Water sorting? There's a more official word for it, I don't remember. Water sorts things. And there's also timing. It doesn't take millions of years to form the layers. It actually can't take millions of years to form the layers, not just because there's not millions of years to work with.
As we move upwards across the layers? Why don't
They're not more complex. You are underestimating how complex a trilobite truly is.
we find all of the bottom dwellers and all of the large non-swimming animals all on the bottom and all of the little fish and light floating animals all on top? Wouldn't you
Wait, hang on.
expect in an event as big and violent as a global flood that they get mixed up a little bit? Why don't we find a single human fossil down among the dinosaurs, or vice versa? How did all the
Okay, the first part, you seem to answer all on your own. Bottom dwellers and heavy animals sink to the bottom, light and floaty animals float to the top. There's your answer. Wouldn't you think the flood mixes them more? Well, it lasted a whole year, so it wouldn't surprise me if there's not much mixing going on between the different types. And hang on a second.
a single human fossil down among the dinosaurs?
Because humans can swim. We actually barely find human fossils at all. Humans would have struggled more than most animals. They also probably float better than lizards. Just saying. Probably. Didn't he say he was gonna prove that the flood didn't make sense of the stuff we see? I don't see him proving that. He's just asking some hypothetical questions. Nothing which takes out the possibility.
Or vice versa? How did all the terrestrial plants survive being under seawater for over a month? How did coral
Seeds. Plants are pretty resilient to flooding.
reefs survive being under that deep of water for a month?
It survives underwater already.
There are some places on Earth where the geological strata is overturned, and creationists love pointing to those places as proof that the geological record is unreliable. But while we have logical explanations for these places,
A process called geological folding. I wonder if you're going to explain how that folding takes place, because rock doesn't like to bend.
where are yours? If everything on Earth died all at once in a global flood, Why are there some places where everything died in reverse order? How do we have different layers?
Hold on a second. Weren't you just asking, why aren't there humans on the dinosaur level and dinosaurs on the other level? You just pointed to a point where they are. There's your answer.
Layers of sedimentary rock at all? Wouldn't they be all
You were asking, why aren't they more mixed up? Well, there's a spot where they're mixed up. They're completely inverted. Pretty mixed up.
at all? Wouldn't they be all mixed up into one homogenized mass if they were all laid down at the same time? How is it that we have different layers of different kinds of rocks that all solidified independently of one another if they were all deposited simultaneously by the same flood? Chalk is pretty much...
Hang on. What do you mean solidified independently of each other? The fact that there were bends in those rocks means they weren't solidified separately. The rocks were bent while they were still soft. Then they solidified.
Much 100% fossils. It's made of the compressed remains of marine microorganisms like plankton and coccolithophores. If there was a global flood, how and why did that compression happen? Wouldn't something so small and light be evenly distributed throughout the entire geological column? Why do the sedimentary...
There you go, arguing against yourself again. You keep talking about why aren't they mixed together, and here's an example you give of them being mixed together. Like, really mixed together and compressed. By the way, under the weight of the water. Water is very heavy.
Rocks in very deep places like the Grand Canyon not contain any fossilized pollen from grasses or flowering plants or any of the other stuff that would have evolved over the last 300 million or so years. There are several places like Clayton Lake, New Mexico.
Why would I expect a rock to have a fossil in it? Like, it can, but why would I expect that?
Where you can find fossilized mud cracks from the Mesozoic era. Literally dry, cracked mud covered underneath millions of years worth of sediment. So how did that mud dry out while it was underwater? If there were only two of each kind...
Now there's a question. Okay, you know what? I'll give you that one. I do not know how mud can dry out underwater. I will have to look into that. But I'm not convinced in your argument. The evidence of the flood is still overwhelming. Just because I lack the explanation for one feature doesn't really affect anything.
There were only two of each kind of animal on the Ark, and all living animals come from those two individuals. Why is there so much genetic diversity within species? In this...
I can't tell if he's going on to a separate question or if he's trying to explain his current question. Let's find out.
This video, Answers in Genesis said that all the animals on Earth came pre-equipped by God with all the alleles they would need to show all the diversity we see today, but that wouldn't make any sense if there were only two of every kind of animal. So are they wrong or are you wrong?
What are you talking about? You just answered your own question and then talked as if you didn't answer your own question. He literally just answered his own question and then complained that his question was not answered. Let's give a specific example. Humans. Noah and his family on the Ark had the genetic capability to form all the different eye colors, all the different skin colors, hair colors, and body types. All the genetic information was there. And then we diversified. It's really quite simple.
Where does all the variation in human skin color and whatnot come from if we're all...
Wow, I literally just answered that.
...descended from one family just a couple thousand years ago? What about hermaphrodites?
Yeah, that was the same question, and I just accidentally answered it because it was the same question.
Hermaphroditic or parthenogenic species? How did Noah distinguish between males and females in species that don't have males and females? Were there still two...
Noah did not go around collecting animals. They came to the Ark. Noah did not have to distinguish them. They distinguished themselves.
Two on the Ark? And if so, why? How did aquatic animals...
What animal are you talking about even? I have a feeling he's probably talking about insects which were not on the Ark. He didn't name a species. He mentioned a feature.
...survived the flood? How did the freshwater...
Hang on, I gotta go start over.
...on the Ark? And if so, why? How did aquatic animals survive the flood?
You cannot just say stuff and expect it to make sense. You have to think about what you are saying.
How? Seriously? That's your question. How did aquatic animals survive water? We have a winner for the dumbest statement of the day.
Freshwater fish survive being mixed into the ocean. And how did the saltwater fish survive the ocean being diluted with enough rainwater to cover the entire planet? Did Noah bring fish and crab?
No, it did not bring fish on the ark, obviously. And who told you that the ocean was salty back then? The ocean gradually became salty. There may have been a certain salinity to it back then, but I am certain it was perfectly drinkable at that moment in time. I mean, not counting all the dirt it was pushing around. Like, before the flood, the ocean would have been drinkable.
Crabs and sea cucumbers and jellyfish and whales up onto the ark? If so, where did he put them? And if not, why did those animals get to escape God's punishment when things like giraffes and mountain lions and lizards didn't? What did all...
Let's just say luck of the draw. He destroyed the world with the flood. They're aquatic, so they lucked out. Is that not good enough for you? Like, what extinction event, seriously, what extinction event would cause even the aquatic animals to go extinct, except for two of every kind somehow? That wouldn't just wipe out everything. You would not be able to save anybody on an ark if you destroyed the earth that thoroughly.
All the carnivores on the boat eat for over a month? If all the fossils...
That over a month? You think the flood happened for a month? The flood happened for a year. And there are two possibilities. Either they ate grain, or they just didn't eat and they hibernated. Animals do that.
Fossils that we know to exist were all resurrected at this very second. It would cover the earth in like 2 feet of solid biomass. Where did all of those animals live before the flood killed them? And what would they...
On the earth and in the water? A lot of that biomass you're talking about was ocean-dwelling animals. Fish and seashells and the like. And others were plants, which take up a lot of sky space. You know, trees are very tall. These are really poorly thought out questions.
And what would they have all been eating? And where would all of the carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus and sulfur and all the other elements needed to make all of those things be alive at the same time possibly have come from? And where did it go? If Noah
You're just saying words, aren't you?
brought every kind of animal onto the ark, why are there any extinct animals at all? Why did things like the dinosaurs have their whole business obliterated while the rest of us got to repopulate? Where...
Extinctions are just a part of life. Are you going to bring up the pandas? Pandas are nearly extinct, and they survived a long time after the flood. So are you going to bring up the pandas?
Where are the gorgonopsids? Where are the trilobites? Where's Paranthropus? Why don't we find any of them mixed in with the dinosaurs if they died at the same time? And why aren't they around today? What did they...
Well, that last one was probably human, but I'm not a paleontologist. I don't know one skeleton from another. But you didn't bring up pandas. Yeah. Animals go extinct. They don't all have to go extinct at the same time. They don't have to go extinct all for the same reason.
They do with all the poop on the boat? If the ark landed...
It's called a shovel. You shovel it. They had a window. They could throw the poop out. And according to answers in Genesis, they had a moon pool, but I think that's just conjecture. It's possible, but it's conjecture.
...landed on Mount Ararat, then why don't we find any penguin fossils between Turkey and Antarctica? Why don't we find any kangaroo fossils between Turkey and Australia?
Because that's not how fossils are formed. Took a while to get here, but so many other issues. Yeah, fossils have to be formed in the flood, not after the flood.
How did any animals get to the Americas? Why don't we find a ton?
They walked. After the flood, there was an ice age, so there was an ice bridge to the Americas. Do you ever just study what you're complaining against?
ton of every kind of animal fossil radiating out from around that mountain, since they would have had to have traveled from there to
Again, fossils do not form like that. Try to have some common sense.
wherever they are now. And more importantly, how did Noah get them from all around the world to begin with? If all
Again, Noah did not get them, they came to him.
the animals died in the flood, and then the earth had to be repopulated with just the animals from the ark, why don't we see a major break in the fossil record while that repopulation happened? Where do diseases...
Again, he is constantly assuming that fossils can just gradually form naturally, as if I died in my backyard, I would turn into a fossil. That is not how it works.
come from? Most pathogens are species specific. They can only infect one kind of animal. So wouldn't that mean that every single animal on the ark
I have to stop because I'm
would have
getting
had
distracted.
to have been infected with every...
What are you doing? No!
I'm not
so mad
anymore.
I'm getting distracted because, is he got glitter? I don't know if you can see this, but does he have glitter on his shirt? Okay, distraction over. What was your question?
Most pathogens are species specific. They can only infect one kind of animal. So wouldn't that mean that every single animal on the ark would have had to have been infected with every single disease that it's possible for that animal to carry in order for those diseases to still be around today? What about all the
That's rich coming from an evolutionist. Do you not believe that pathogens can mutate and adapt to their surroundings? Like, of all the things that could mutate, pathogens would have the easiest time. I mean, of all the things that could adapt, pathogens would have the easiest time. Because shorter shelf life, quicker generation turnover. No, all these species-specific pathogens could have, quote-unquote, evolved after the flood. You don't need them to personally exist. At best, you need one proto-pathogen to exist, and then it diversifies. Do you not believe in diversification?
pathogens that infect plants? What about a lot of things about plants? What about the parasites that have to live in or on
What about a lot of things about plants? That's your question.
other animals to survive? Where did Noah keep the tapeworm?
Read your Bible. There were no tapeworms on the ark. Well, actually, tapeworm's a bad example. Tapeworm could have been in the pig. Seriously. Come on. Do you not know where tapeworms live? But all the insects, they weren't, unless they were hitchhiking, they were not on the ark.
Where did Noah keep the pubic lice? Where did Noah keep the Trichomonas vaginalis, a single-celled protozoan that parasitizes humans, causing the STD known as trichomoniasis? Who did Noah have unprotected sex with in order to make sure that he got it on the ark?
Again, that's just the same thing as pathogen. That could have been living in the ocean, in a fish even, and then it just diversified over time and made its way into that job.
You see what I mean now? The flood myth not only
I see that you don't know what you're talking about, and you don't vet your own questions.
fails to provide any useful answers, it raises a myriad of unanswerable...
This segment could have easily been twice as long. Yeah, when you don't vet your questions and you just ask random questions, sure, you can make it as long as you want. Like, if the flood happened, why is there still outer space? That's about on par with some of these questions.
questions. It is not a productive explanatory tool.
And there's a lot of volcanic material mixed into these layers. Vast amounts of molten material entered the ocean. That's what makes up seafloors around the world.
That's because of plate tectonics, Jane. It's called seafloor spreading. Consider, for example, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which is currently spreading apart at a rate of around 3 centimeters per year. We can do radiometric dating on the Atlantic seafloor farther and farther
Don't even get me started on radiometric dating.
and farther away from this ridge, and we get measurements of older and older and older rock. Now, why do you suppose we would get different measurements if all of these layers were laid down at the exact same time? It's because they weren't laid down at the same time, Jane.
I feel like he was talking about two different things there. Anyway, radiometric dating is complete bunk, and I've already wasted 2 hours responding to these videos. I don't want to take any time to go over why. Just check out my playlist. Look for Standing for Truth or Philip Stott. Look for videos on that.
And that relates to the Ice Age. Storm tracking models show that warm oceans would cause severe storms and lead to massive snowfall.
Wait, you're saying hotter oceans make colder continents? Sounds weird.
It's literally basic climate science, John. It's why pointing to a snowstorm as evidence against climate change is an apocalyptically silly thing to do.
Weird, but true. Today's snowstorms begin as ocean water. Hotter water increases evaporation. Plus, volcanic dust and debris would have blocked out the sun during the summer, so the fallen snow would not have melted.
Now that makes sense.
John, I'm going to need you to stop saying things. If the ocean was deep enough to cover the entire planet, and there was sufficient volcanic activity at the bottom of the brand new worldwide ocean to heat it up and change global climate patterns, then wouldn't that much heat also have affected the formation of all the fossils of all of the animals that just died in this global flood? After all, that's why we don't find any fossils in igneous or metamorphic rock, right? Because
I think he's vastly overestimating the amount of heat in the water. Water cannot get above boiling, otherwise it evaporates. The maximum temperature it will stay is 212 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. Do you think that temperature would affect fossils?
that much heat destroys them, right? So if what you're saying made even one fraction of an iota of sense, wouldn't that mean that we would have no fossils whatsoever? You cannot
No, it would not.
just say stuff and expect it to make sense. You have to
Oh, I should clip that.
think about what you are saying.
Why do you think volcanoes were part of the flood? It was just 40 days of rain, right?
The rain didn't begin until after the fountains of the Great Deep burst forth, according to Genesis 7:11, meaning that molten material plus water came up through Earth's crust. Most of what comes out of today's volcano is still water as steam.
Or if you would also like a quesadilla.
Okay, so that explains one ice
That
age.
looked like a terrible
Weren't there like
quesadilla.
4 or 5?
Well, evolutionists don't have a satisfactory explanation for one ice age, let alone 4 or 5. But the flood gives enough calamity in a short amount of time to actually make an ice age. There was only one that happened a few hundred years after the flood.
So, just so we're clear, because you don't think that we have sufficient explanations for all of the major ice ages, which we do, by the way, that means that you can ignore most of them and just pick one of them and attribute that one event to something that you have zero evidence for.
We have mountains of fossils which are evidence for the flood. We have geologic sorting, which is evidence of the flood. We have plenty of evidence for the flood.
Sounds about right. For the record, there are lots of different kinds of events that can cause an ice age, but the regularly occurring climate cycles that bring about the glacial periods that we call ice
Which you cannot prove.
ages are largely and predictably governed by what we call Milankovitch cycles. Milankovitch cycles are variations within 3 factors of Earth's orbit and orientation, called eccentricity, obliquity, and precession. Each of these 3 factors take between tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of years to fluctuate, and they each affect the length and severity of both seasons and long-term climate patterns. They are what cause glacial and interglacial periods. They also all comport with both the fossil and the geological record. They are all testable and repeatable, and they all make
What? Testable and repeatable? You're claiming they happen over hundreds of thousands of years. That is not testable or repeatable. You certainly have not, nobody has tested them or repeated them, because nobody's lived that long.
exponentially more sense than a global flood.
The flood gives enough calamity in a short amount of time to actually make an ice age. There was only one that happened a few hundred years after the flood.
Which would explain many of the Ice Age fossils we find near the surface of the Earth, not deep down in the flood layers.
Like saber-toothed cats.
And woolly mammoths.
More recent animals appear higher up in the fossil record because they were alive more recently. I agree with you. I do not, however, agree with you that Mastodon and Gigantopithecus lived together on a boat with a 600-year-old man who was riddled with STDs.
Also, the book of Job was written just about that time and mentioned snow, ice, and cold more than any other book in the Bible.
The book of Job also mentions Behemoth, Leviathan, and unicorns. But by all means, go on. Oh, before anybody flies to the comments to say that I'm misinterpreting those parts, don't forget that Answers in Genesis says that all of those things are literally real because the Bible says they are.
How's that you not misinterpreting it? Your misinterpretation... Well, first of all, I don't know what you think Behemoth and Leviathan are. Both of those names are just synonymous with a really big creature. Behemoth being a land, Leviathan being sea. Behemoth is a big land creature. Leviathan is a big sea creature. This isn't Final Fantasy where Behemoth brings to mind a certain specific type of animal. It just means a really big creature. And unicorn in the Bible is most obviously referring to rhinoceros. Unless you can find a fossil of a horse with a single horn. In the case of the unicorn, you are misinterpreting what the Bible means by unicorn. It's just a creature with a single horn. The idea of a horse with a single horn didn't come about until much, much later. It's relatively a modern concept.
So, when scientists try to stretch 5 extinctions and 5 different ice ages over the evolutionary view of the geologic column, they're not sure how they happened. But when you compress the geologic column down into a biblical time frame, it's all explained by a worldwide flood followed by an ice age.
Yep. Kind of makes you think, doesn't it?
No, Jane. No, it does not.
Nothing makes Forrest think. Oh, okay. I'm just gonna scan the right and see if that other video I had thought about doing is over here. If not, I'm done right now. Okay, I couldn't find it, which is fine, because I've already spent over 2 hours on this video, and editing is gonna be a nightmare. So I will leave you off with some recommendations from my playlist. A Bit of Orange is good for an entertaining way of debunking evolution. Mostly from semantics, I think. Like, evolutionists don't want to define evolution properly. They want to muddy the explanations. Then Philip Stott, very thorough, and his videos are also very short, so they're easy to watch. Ironically, even though they're easy to watch, I've only watched 33 of them. Or I only have 33 of them in my playlist. And there's like 87, I think. Discovery Science, also a great video, great playlist to go to debunk evolution. Especially the long story short videos. Those are really good. Deflate does some stuff on evolution. Young Earth Creation and Standing for Truth. I'm gonna take this opportunity to complain about that. Young Earth Creation is basically a carbon copy of Standing for Truth. It's basically a secondary channel they have, or Matt has, as a form of a backup in case something happens to Standing for Truth. I could see a Standing for Truth video come up in my recommendations, and then the same exact video come up again under Young Earth Creation, but with a different thumbnail. And I don't know about you, but I don't like watching reruns. So it's possible that some of these videos here are the same as some of these videos here. I don't know. There's a lot. Another problem I have with Standing for Truth is it's got so many videos. He really needs to do a separate channel just for debates and just clean up his playlists. Just move all the debates over to its own separate channel. Because even if you go to their channel and go through their playlists, even going through their playlists, it's just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. There's too much. It is completely overwhelming. Alright, so that's my recommendations after watching that Forrest Valkai video. Prophet of Zod was purely psychologizing, so I don't know what video I would recommend to further answer that one. Maybe Deflate, I don't know. Anyway, that is all. I've got to go edit or make another video or something. See ya.